Thanks very much for coming this evening. A quote from Australian author Tim Winton, and he said, "Australia is a place with more land than people, more geography than architecture. But it is not and never has been empty. Few landscapes have been so deeply known." And with those thoughts in mind, I would like to ask Gadigal Elder Alan Madden to provide the welcome to country.
Thank you. Once again, my name is Alan Madden, Gadigal Elder. For my first song, married man, 10 children, 26 grandchildren and 17 great-great. Yes, we did have TV. Just couldn't afford the bloody electricity. Born and bred in Redfern, capital of Sydney. 100 yards away, that way, in Cornwallis Street, a long time ago. Welcome to country is always an honour and a pleasure. Just to give you a little bit of an insight of where you are and who we are. As with all welcomes, firstly I'd like to acknowledge our First Nations and traditional owners of the lands that you may have come from or work upon, and pay my respects. To all our Aboriginal elders, all elders, past and present, also pay my respects. To all our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters, from whatever Aboriginal or island nation you may have come from, welcome to Gadigal. And to all our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters here this evening, a very warm and sincere welcome to you to Gadigal. No matter where you've come from, whether it be across the seas, across the state or across town, once again, a very warm and sincere welcome to you to Gadigal. And as I've mentioned many times before, was, is, and always will be Aboriginal land. Only three things short than that: coming, taxation and going. It's an honour and a pleasure to be here tonight, or this evening, to welcome one and all to Gadigal. Gadigal is one of 29 clans of the Eora Nation. The Eora Nation is bounded by nature's own, the Hawkesbury River to the north, the Pean to the west, and Georges River to the south. And in between those three mighty rivers is the Eora Nation. And in that nation were 29 clans, and the clans land we're on this evening is Gadigal. On behalf of the Gadigal mob of the Eora Nation, once again, a very warm and sincere welcome to you to Gadigal. There's an old Aboriginal saying out there, I think it's very appropriate for you mob here this evening. They say, where there's a will, there's relatives. And as you travel across these traditional lands and waters, may the spirits of our ancestors guide, look over you, and keep you safe. So once again, on behalf of the Gadigal mob, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan. Let's get started. So we had the pleasure of talking last night. I think let's get straight into it, mate. You've kind of found yourself as the chairman of Standard Hotels, which is now a global company. Talk to us about the kind of key traits and some of the things that helped you get to where you are today. We talked last night about humility and hard work, but I think for such a cool brand, you've done it, and I'd really like to hear from the crowd, you know, what that journey's been like for you personally.
Sure. Well, first of all, this one here. Well, thanks for everybody for coming and making the time. It means a lot to us. We're new to the region. We're new to Australia, so it means a great deal that you took the time out of your busy schedules to be here. I sort of fell into this business in a weird way. I started my career in real estate investment with a company called Starwood Capital. Some of you may know Starwood Capital. And I got there and there was about maybe 10 or 15 people that worked there. I was probably the second younger person that was hired straight out of college. And somehow I got wrapped up in the first project I worked on was the acquisition of ITT Sheraton. So we went from being a company of 15 people to the biggest hotel company in the world in a matter of a year, which is just, it had nothing to do with me, but I was along for the ride. And I worked for our chairman, a guy named Barry Sternlicht, who's kind of legendary in the industry. And I became his right-hand man for a period of time, and so I got to learn a lot that way. I learned humility, not from him, but I learned I needed to be humble to be around him. And so what I realized is that investing in real estate is interesting, but investing in hotels within real estate is a lot more interesting to me than office buildings or apartments or single-family homes, etc., because it encompasses so much. And if you start looking at the screen, it's hard to really describe standard hotels without seeing them. But it's architecture, it's design, it's food, it's drink, it's beverage, it's music, it's culture. All of those things wrapped into what happens to be real estate. And to be involved in that has been just a treat over the last 25 years.
And as a young guy, you, as you say, under Barry, you completed, I guess, a pretty important transaction when you were about 24.
Yeah.
I mean, just talk through, you know, it was a major transaction, but what was it about that made you open your eyes to this hotel sector?
I think when we bought ITT Sheraton, ITT, for those of you who don't know, it was actually the biggest company in the world at one point in time. Bigger than GE, bigger than anything at that. It was before the tech giants, etc. It was an old school conglomerate, and it owned a lot of different businesses. Sheraton was one of the big businesses. It had about 750 hotels at that time. It also had the Chiga hotel portfolio in Italy, which is some beautiful, beautiful hotels. It also owned Caesar's Palace, the gaming business in Vegas. It owned ITT World Directories, the telephone directories business, and it owned this whole thing. And so we looked at this and said, what's really valuable within this and what's really special is the hotels. And within the hotels, you had things like the St. Regis, single hotel that we turned into a brand. You had obviously Sheraton. We had bought Westin hotels. And so we got really to say, well, what makes this portfolio special? It's the real estate, but there's also something about the experiences and the brand. So we're the first to launch into turning it into a multi-brand company, which now you can see has kind of gone haywire with, you know, Marriott owning 30 brands and all the rest of it. Right. But for us, it was the real estate. It was the opportunity to create brands out of that real estate.
Tell the audience about one of the trips you made to Asia when you were young. I feel like this was one of the moments in your life that helped not only get to where you are now, but in fact culturally it sounds like it really opened your eyes to the Southeast Asia experience.
Yeah, it was a good question. It was a big deal. After we finished this ITT transaction, and if those you remember, 1998 was a big financial crisis in Asia. The baht devalued, and the government took over the finance institutions. So my boss, again, he's a great real estate investor. And we took a trip out to Asia because he said, this looks very familiar. It looks like the banking crisis in the US, which happened in the early 90s. So we took a trip out to Asia. We did about 10 cities in 10 days. And we stopped along the way and meet investors and real estate investors and hotel people and hedge fund managers and government officials, etc. And two interesting events happened on that trip. One was about the fifth or sixth stop, we went to Phuket. And I was 24 years old. I grew up in the suburbs of Southern California. I didn't even know what Phuket was. And we landed in Phuket and we went to the Atmanpuri. And I looked at this place and I just couldn't believe what I saw. I thought this must be the most beautiful place I've ever seen. Certainly I didn't think a hotel like this could ever have existed. Right. It was a hugely eye-opening experience to what was actually possible and what it meant to have that type of architecture, design, beauty, and just the emotion that I still get when I think about the first time I saw that hotel. The following leg of the trip was to Bangkok. And we got there and the government, as I said, had just seized these finance institutions. And my boss and a few of the more senior partners of the firm went to meet the Prime Minister of Thailand to see how we could participate. As a 24-year-old young man, I wasn't invited on that. So I was messing around the city doing, I don't know what I was doing, but I was supposed to meet them at the airport. And I got a call and they said, hey, Amar, Barry thinks it's really interesting in Thailand. There's some real investment opportunities here. He wants you to stay. I said, oh my God, stay? How long? What do you mean stay? How long should I stay? He said, how long? He wants you to stay indefinitely. So I literally stayed on that trip about 10 weeks. I stayed in the region 2 years.
Right.
And we invested in a company called Sensiri, which has now become a majority shareholder.
So, this is an outsider looking in, but it's like connect the dots, right? Southeast Asia was not only a cultural impact on you, but you made some good lasting business connections
Right.
too.
And in this business, the relationships matter such a great deal, which is what we're trying to kick off here, is to form relationships that I hope will last over long periods of time.
Exactly. So let's talk about boutique and lifestyle hotels. It's pretty obvious, and the big brands talk about this too, which is creating memorable or unique experiences. I mean, the amount of times we talk about this, it's kind of getting a little bit ridiculous. When it comes to standard hotels, what are some of the things that you're taking real pride in? And maybe it's an example from, I guess, the development of Highline or something that's happened in the way that you've put together a project that makes you feel like that's an experience.
Yeah, I think the way we think about standards, look at the brand, it's turned upside down, which people ask why that is the case. It's really because we like to approach it with turning hospitality on its head, looking at things that no one ever looked at that way before. And so we think of ourselves, and I hope when you visit our hotels you see it, we think of ourselves as more than a hotel. We think of ourselves as a cultural hub for the city. And I'll give you an example of this, the standard Highline, which you'll see some pictures up here when it comes up. It's a 338-room hotel spanning what's now the Highline Park in New York. And that is called the Meatpacking District, because when we were there, it truly was meatpackers still there. In the morning you would see truly the blood on the streets from the butchers. You had some interesting characters in that neighborhood. And they were building this thing called the Highline Park, which was an old railroad track. And no one really believed, no one could see the vision for it.
Yeah.
And we thought this is really, really something special. And we could see what was possible here. So we made the move to build a hotel there that everybody thought was kind of crazy. And we built it for those architects and designers here, we built it in a very, very cool fashion, which was that it's a brutalist architecture building built in 2008 in the spirit of something that would have been built in the 1960s or 70s. Because we wanted to make it feel like it had always been there. So that's kind of the story that happened. You found this whole park, this building that happened to be discovered along with it. Then, so that's the architecture. But what really makes Standard special is what you put inside. And people ask me things like, are you a 5-star hotel or a 4-star hotel or a luxury? It doesn't, those upper upscale and all these definitions, that doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't matter. And so what we have in there is everything from the bottom, underneath the railroad tracks, we have a beer garden. And we didn't even know it was found space. And now it does about 10 million in revenue a year. Wow. People buying sausages and beers and watching ball games. Then you go to the rooftop, and we have a place called the Boom Boom Room, which hosts the Met Gala after party every year for the last 10 years. And the who's who of the celebrities are up there. And then you have the Grill, which is a place for, it's an American brasserie. And then you have Le Ben, which is a nightclub and a dance club. This all happens in 200,000 square feet. So when we say it's about creating experiences, it truly is top to bottom, price point agnostic to what happens in that building. And just one stat on that, to prove that it is really much more than a hotel. Uber a few years ago, before the pandemic, did a little data thing, and the Standard Highline was the #1 pickup and drop-off destination in the city, besides the airport, which is pretty remarkable.
Big city. Yeah, amazing. We did talk a little bit last night about both in terms of room design, room size, facilities, amenity. I really loved your perspective, which was there's no one price point. As you say, it's diversity of product and diversity of the guests that, in fact, you quite like that. And that means that, the question is, as a brand, you're being flexible. Do you want to just talk to some of those things that make it relevant?
For sure. I think one of the big differences with Standard is we don't have, it's funny the name, we don't have a book of standards that you say we want to open a Standard hotel. We don't want to have that to give you. So that's a good thing or it's a bad thing. There are developers who want that, and they want that exactly. Tell me what to build, and I will build it, and that's it. I don't even need to talk about it. But for us, it's like, okay, now let's get into the project. What does this market need? What does this city need? What does this location need? What does this building deserve? What does the community need? And you can do a lot of different things within that. We just had a conversation about a Standard hotel in London, which we opened in 2019. It's in an old town council building in King's Cross. Everybody thought was an ugly building, and every other developer, every other group that looked at it wanted to tear it down. We're the only ones that wanted to preserve it. It's a funny thing because we face St. Pancras Station, which is one of the most beautiful buildings by any stretch, anywhere. And people are worried about the way our building looks. Well, we're inside, we look at that.
Yeah.
They look at us. So from the hospitality, it's got to be inside out. The other thing about that, what we did there, is it's a kind of a big squat building, which is not ideal for a hotel,
Right.
the way it's laid out.
The floor plate.
The floor plate's terrible for a hotel. But, and this will sound terrible at first until I explain it, in the UK you're allowed to do rooms with no windows, which sounds awful. But if you think about it, if you're a musician that's working all night and you just want to sleep during the day and pay half the price, that's not a bad thing. If you're going to Paris the next day or you miss your train and you just want to stay the night there, that's a good thing. If you're a young person who wants to hang out at the bar upstairs and wants to sleep in anyway, that's a good thing. So if you go to a beautiful luxury hotel here, every room has to be 50 square meters, every room has to be appointed in this way, every room has to have these kind of materials. For us, what the neighborhood deserves, what the building deserves, what the community deserves can be very different.
I think just the perspective alone and the way you've, in other words, the market will decide in a way, and you've got some good kind of connections with the way that the brand is marketed and they want to be a part of that experience. Awesome. In terms of the way your development rollout for standard hotels has worked, and again, it's a brand I'm still learning a lot about, but the observation I guess I would make is that you have now put a hotel in Melbourne, which will open at the end of this year, Q4 as I understand it, in Fitzroy, and I guess some people probably went, right, wow, why Fitzroy? And I think you've already answered it in part around neighbourhoods which are up and coming, but you kind of decided, I don't need the marquee site for the very first location. I can kind of focus in on or zero in on these up and coming opportunities and add value to those neighbourhoods.
Yeah, that's right. I think, every brand would say, I want to be in, I need to be in London, I need to be in Paris, I need to be in Milan, name these cities. Like, that's obvious. We like things that are not that obvious. We like neighborhoods that are not that obvious and buildings that are not that obvious. But we like, after we do them, people look at it and say, oh, that was obvious. Yeah. Like the way King's Cross is now. So Fitzroy is an interesting one. I don't proclaim to know Australia at all. It's actually my first visit here. But we have a great team who understands things, and I love to read and research what's going on. And I kind of felt like I knew what Fitzroy was about before I saw it.
Right.
And I went there and it validated it. And it's not, and we have a saying in Standard is that truly everybody's welcome, but it's not for everybody.
Right.
And that's okay. And I can understand why people may not want to stay at that hotel or in that neighborhood.
Sure.
I also understand why a lot of people would.
Yeah.
And so I love the fact that if you go to Melbourne for the first time and stay in Fitzroy, you discovered something. You're in the know. You found something, and we were able to help you, and you will feel really damn cool going back and saying that's where you stayed.
And in the context of watching the brand now grow, London, you've got open, you've also got Bangkok open. I think it's probably worth just explaining to the room that you're no longer a North American company, really.
Yeah, that's right. So when I had not found the company, I had not found the brand. I came on board and worked with the founder starting about 13 years ago or so. And then through a confluence of events, I ended up raising some money and buying the company, buying the brand from him with the dream of bringing it around the world. My prior responsibility, I was responsible for the global development for W Hotels many years ago. And we did that successfully. I think we built a powerful brand there.
Yeah.
Enough said.
Yes,
and
we did experience some benefits locally.
But so my dream was to bring it around the world, and when I joined it, we had 4 hotels. Now we have 21 hotels, and the way we approach it though is that we know we need to get close to the action. You can't be doing this by remote control. Even though we want to build a global brand, it's a local business. We need local partners, we need local capital partners, we need local architects, designers, and so we're going one step at a time. And to leave North America, the first stop along the way, which made a lot of sense, was London, because the similarities, the crossover, the demand for the product, and so we hunted and found the best spot we could, and we opened that. So we want to open a sort of flagship in each region. And in Asia Pacific, we opened last year in the tallest building in Thailand, a standard hotel, called the Mahanakhon Building, 77 stories, and it's truly, we would invite any and all of you to come visit that, but we need to prove to people that we can not a North American brand, and we can open amazing things and excel in different parts of the world. So that's where we're headed.
It's amazing. I think what would resonate with the crowd as well is that there'll be developers in the room and their design team / consultants going, yeah, but design tech services based in, I don't know, New York City, some people in Bangkok. You know, do you feel like the tyranny of distance is an issue, or how have you dealt with that with Melbourne? And, you know, if we get you a site here in Sydney.
Yeah, no. So we run the group out of Bangkok, but even on Melbourne, it's a small project, but we hired someone locally already, an architect, to join the team, because we need to do it right. We need to be on the ground. So we're not going to put our people way ahead, but as soon as if there's a real project, we will promise to resource it in the right way and be responsive and make decisions quickly. We actually know that for the developers in the room, time is money.
Right.
We need to be creative, but we need to be responsive. So we absolutely will do that. And in this business, it's about finding and hiring the best people. Why? Someone just asked, why are we doing this event? We need to find the best people, the best partners, the best people to work on our team, the best consultants. And so we're doing all of this ahead of that, so that if we get the right project with one of you all in Sydney, we'll know what we're doing, at least we'll try.
Just call these people. We absolutely talked about how there's a lot of risk in the market at the moment. There's, you know, high construction costs, high land prices, high costs of debt. Like, in other words, the ability to pull together a hotel development in this environment is near impossible. But again, do you want to just make the point perhaps one more time around how, as a lifestyle hotel, what are the benefits? I mean, you know, what is it about choosing you guys that's going to give me a better result over the stock standard approach?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think from what I've seen very, very quickly, what I know in Melbourne, Sydney, there's so much great stuff happening here. Just look at where we're sitting. I mean, this is about as innovative a workspace as you can find anywhere in the world. And you go to the restaurants that you have in these cities, you go to the bars that you have, the cafes, my God. In Melbourne, you know, the corner cafe is better than most cafes in most cities. So you have all that. You have the culture, you have the fashion, you have the design, you have the art world. But you don't have really fun, interesting, cool hotels. There's a few, and don't get me wrong, but not to the level of every other sector of what this country has.
Right.
So, which actually makes it a great opportunity.
Right.
Because there's no question the cities are ready for it. People just haven't taken the plunge to do it. Now, I'm staying at the Ace, which is probably the first one. They've done a great job. And they're good friends of mine, and they've done a fabulous job. But there's so much more room to do that here in Melbourne and elsewhere. So, and to me, when I think about it, now from a business and sort of corporate strategy perspective, doing something that is similar to everything else is a much bigger risk than doing something different than everything else. It's actually the opposite. Developers get scared of doing something different. To me, that's less risky than doing something that's the same as everything else.
Right.
I think that needs to be made, that point needs to be made very clear. It's not for everybody, again. Second thing I would say, from an economic perspective, as I said, first of all, we customize the project and the development, which is important. Second is, we don't use luxury materials. You go to our hotels, I think they look beautiful, they're timeless. It's not marble, it's not granite, it's not crystal, so we're not spending the most money. I had a mentor of mine who said, when you build something as a developer, all that matters is how big you build it and what you put in it. It's very simple. So if we can build efficient buildings, we don't need the biggest rooms, we don't need, and every square foot has to be revenue generating,
Right.
and we don't need the most expensive materials. So there you already have a proposition that's a better economic model. Then you think about the kind of the P&L of a business. Of course we can fill the rooms, we will fill the rooms, we know how to do that. But the F&B spaces, how you maximize the revenue per square foot, whether it's F&B or wellness or co-work or whatever it is, that's really, really important. And the big hotel companies really have never been good at running the F&B. So if you can build it right, build it smart, not use the most expensive materials, pick a location that's not the most expensive location, fill the hotel with people and maximize the revenue per square foot in F&B, that's a high return on investment.
Right.
And that's a much lower risk than something that's a commodity.
Right. We've got hotel owners in the room that would absolutely be very focused in on that. How do you make sure, or how do you compete, for example, with, and you touched on it, a loyalty program or a big distribution pipe that one of the global operators are offering? I mean, I think the way you do it is quite different, but what is it that you're offering that's different to them?
Well, if you look at everything that's flashing up here, first of all, it looks like nothing else. So when we open a hotel, it gets a lot of attention because nothing in the market will have ever looked like that before. So whether it's the design magazines or the PR, whatever, the cultural, we get represented in a lot more than travel publications. So across the board, people will absolutely know we came into town. So that's where it starts. The second thing is that we build the hotels for the local clientele. So you get the local clientele.
For the city, right?
For the city, for the local clientele, for the cultural, social community. Yeah. If you get them on board, they're the biggest transmitters of word of mouth, which is obviously the best marketing. Right. Lastly, because the brand punches way above its weight, for those of you who know hotels, we get about 50% of our bookings direct, not using the OTAs, which is a lot. And so we do that, and we have innovative distribution techniques as well. We launched, this is a funny thing, we launched a little app called One Night Standard. And what that is in a hotel business, after 12 p.m. of a day, you're virtually getting no bookings. After 3 p.m., you're getting none. Right. So we took all our inventory and put it on the app after 3 p.m. And for about half the price, you can stay in a standard hotel. Yeah. And the cool thing about that is it's a different clientele. So if you're commuting, you don't want to drive home that evening, you can book a room for half the price. If you're partying in the nightclub and you want to stay in the room, you book it for half the price. If you're having a staycation, right, why not do that? So the combination of taking care of our guests, punching above our weight in PR, our distribution systems, and doing innovative things, we compete all day long And to me, the loyalty programs are okay, but it's kind of a cheap form of loyalty. It's like bribing people with points. That's different than forcing yourself to know your customer and take care of them.
Right. Culturally in Australia, and I think this is probably the crux of the issue with our hotels in a lot of ways, especially the F&B venues, is if I'm not staying in the hotel, I don't feel overly comfortable hanging out in the bar, spending money in the restaurant, going to use the gymnasium / the wellness centre / the spa. I mean, culturally, we've seen this ourselves, even with brands like QT or what I guess I'm really interested in is what are the perspectives on how you can kind of help address that, you know?
It is an interesting cultural thing in Australia that I've heard about. Asia is different because they're used to having the dining in hotels, and fundamentally that's in the Middle East, that's where they've been. I think the way we do it, for the architects and designers, it's how you lay out the hotel is very important. The flow of the hotel is very important. Having exterior access to the bar or the restaurant so it doesn't feel like a hotel bar or restaurant, that's important. And then, again, I keep going back to hiring the right people. You have to run the restaurants and bars as if you were a restaurant and bar owner. Not as if you're a hotel company that has a restaurant or bar inside your property, which means you hire that impresario, you hire the right bartender, you hire the right concierge, you do the right maitre d', and you staff it accordingly. If those people are local people, not people we brought from outside, and you run it that way and market it that way and promote it that way and get the right people in there, you can do it. It's just it's a mentality shift.
So two things jump out. One is you put a restaurant on the top of the standard hotel in Bangkok and the rooftop. Just explain what was the cuisine in that location?
Mexican, which is kind of crazy. It seems crazy, but then it's actually kind of not. So we're doing this hotel in Bangkok, and we're doing it during COVID, and it's 77 stories high, and we're like, what should be on the rooftop? And so the idea actually said, what is, instead of saying what is easy, what makes sense, but what is difficult, what's no one ever done before? Now that could be interesting. And to me, Mexican, I have a personal fascination with Mexican cuisine. I think it's one of the least understood cuisines around the world. Fundamentally, I think about why. There's no Mexicans. I don't know how many Mexicans are in Australia, but I don't think there are very many. And it's hard for Mexicans to travel and get into places. There's a few. A couple, yeah. But so the cuisine hasn't traveled. Any Mexican cuisine in most of the world is a bad version of Americanized Mexican cuisine. So of course you don't like it. And so I thought, and the other thing is the palate in Asia, and Thailand in particular, it's sharing, it's family style, it's spicy. And so you start thinking about all these things, let's do it, and it's fun. Yeah. And so we said, why not? So a little longer story. So during COVID, I called a very, very close friend who's a designer in Mexico City who knows everything about the culinary scene. I said, what chef do you know that's crazy enough during COVID to open a Mexican restaurant on the 77th floor in Bangkok? He said, I got one guy for you. He lives in Guadalajara. I said, okay, give me his number. We had 2 conversations. He got on a plane and moved to Bangkok.
I said, Amar must be really compelling because that makes no sense at all.
And now there's a 3-month waiting list to get a reservation at that restaurant.
And for some reason, it just makes me want to go and check it out, right? I don't know why. The other thing I guess I'd talk about with lifestyle hotels is swimming pools. In Australia, we'll often say, yep, we really like one, especially in a resort location. In certain brands, we'll insist on one. At the end of the day, you'll get a small group of people, maybe a few families using it during the peak periods, but they don't monetize them. I mean, is that a problem?
I think we have to study it more here. So there's a couple of different swimming pools we have in our brand. One swimming pool, it's in there. No joke, it's in a nightclub. We have a swimming pool in the nightclub. It's called Le Band in New York. So that's one kind of swimming pool. We have, someone here just went to Hoi Hin. We have a family style swimming pool there, the Maldives, of course. So I think we look at it on a customized basis.
Right.
But again, the principles that we go back to are people having fun, people enjoying themselves, making it warm, making it welcoming, making it comfortable. I think the generation one of sort of boutique and lifestyle hotels were very nightclubby and kind of very velvet rope type of environment, very dark, very moody. That's not what we're about. When you arrive at a standard hotel, and the good examples of Standard Miami, which people love, you get out of your taxi or Uber and they say, welcome home. And I walk in that hotel, not just because you walk in that hotel, you feel like you can take off your shoes, you feel like you're taken care of, and everything is, and you actually don't want to leave.
Right.
And that's how we want to make you feel. So if we can get that right, whether there's a swimming pool or not, whether there's a nightclub or not, we have to figure out how to make people have that feeling. And if we can do that, they'll keep coming back.
The Carlisle Hotel, I think in Brisbane, there was something went viral around, people placing towels down to save their spot by the pool. I mean, in other words, it's got a bit ridiculous in that scenario, but I think the thing that I noticed in the US the most was just how seamless the pool experience was with revenue generation, but also good service, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like Miami's a good example because we have all the guests are taken care of there, but we have a lot of local people that want to come use the pool as well. We let them do that.
Yeah.
And if you get the right crowd, they like mixing with each other. So to the kind of clientele we want, they want to see what Sydney's all about. They want the outside, they want the people from the community to come. The traditional luxury hotels has to be all about the guest. If you're paying $1,000 a night, I get it, but the crowd that we want are the ones that want to figure out what Sydney's all about. So if we can welcome the local community in, mix with them, then all the better.
So it's a balance. I completely get it. And in terms of a developer, again, one of the things we've talked about is how you could also use the standard brand in terms of, if you like, a halo effect for things like branded residential, right. Or So is it part of the same conversation that if you get the amenity right, you get these different groups of people, coming together? Is branded residences something you'd look at?
For sure. So I think, one type of loyalty and a loyal guest is the people that stay in the hotels. That's a commitment to spend a couple nights with us or several nights during the week or, a month during the year. A different level of commitment is to own a hotel with us. That's a huge investment, that's a huge commitment. Another type of commitment is to live with us. And as I mentioned at the Standard Miami, I'm very guilty of going to Miami and planning all kinds of dinners all around the city and then never leaving the property because I feel so comfortable there. Right. So with that in mind, you have the idea of people buying units in or next to the resident, in or next to the hotels. Yeah. We've done that in a couple places now. A good example is we're building a standard hotel in Lisbon, which is a place I would love to live. And if anybody's been there, people fall in love with the way they fall in love with a place like Sydney. You would love to live here for all kinds of reasons. And so we're building a hotel there, and next door we're building residences which you could buy. Right. And what happens from a developer perspective, two things. There's absolutely a premium paid for the use of the services of the hotel and the brand and the design that we do and all that stuff. Access to the spa and signing privileges at the hotel and room service and all that. So that's quite clear and that's quite established. The other thing that happens is the sales velocity of the units is much quicker. Right. Because we have a big distribution system, people recognize the brand, it's a halo effect, it's a signal of quality. So we think it's the ultimate expression of buying into the brand, but it's really for the developers. It's a better economic proposition to the extent that it lays out appropriately.
Yeah. That does make sense. I think in Australia we've definitely got developers that want to explore that. So I'd suggest that, there's been some success with the Mondrian on the Gold Coast. There's another one, Dale, what's the other one? One Hotel Melbourne, it's got some brand residences. So there's definitely been some inroads in that space, but I think there's room for more. Maybe just talk a little bit about how the partnership with, if you like, capital partner ownership with Sansiri has developed, and also what that means in terms of the Bangkok office. You know, it's a fully fledged corporate office. You know, what does that look like in terms of, you know, the support and infrastructure for the growth going forward?
So as I mentioned, this business is so much about the relationships. And that trip I mentioned to you 25 years ago, I landed in Bangkok and we invested in Sansiri. The shoe was on the other foot at that time because they needed some capital. I was with an investment company, and I maintained that relationship for 20 years until I was ready to do something and buy the Standard brand. And so they invested with me in doing that. So first of all, it goes back a long time. Second, they're the biggest developers in Thailand, one of the biggest developers in Southeast Asia. But the reason I did it with them is because they have the resources and the capital. They really, really, really care about the brand. So they've left us to develop the brand the way we see fit. But what they've also helped with is the infrastructure in place to build out an office in Asia, to have a cross-functional office between brand and design and architecture and food and beverage and finance and everything, just so that when we find the right opportunities here, we can jump on them and it won't feel like you're being serviced by a US company.
Because I think the bottom line is that any developer or owner wants the best of both worlds. We want the local experience, but we want this global world-class version of a hotel experience. I mean, I think that's the key balance that they're trying to strive for, which hopefully leads to the best economic performance.
Yeah, that's right. And it's really hard because people love the Standard brand. So we get approaches for people to say, can we do a Standard? And I'll give you an example. It happens a lot in Cape Town.
Right.
Cape Town's fantastic. It's fantastic. I know a Standard would work there, but the answer is no. Because we can't service it. We can't do a good job for you. We don't want to say we can do something if we can't. So having seen projects that have gone bad for that reason, we want to put the infrastructure in place. And we're not perfect yet, but we want to put the infrastructure in place so that when we find the opportunity finds us, we're ready to do a good job.
Nice. When it comes to design and development of a hotel, which includes these layered F&B experiences, entertainment areas, swimming pools, sometimes day spas, wellness, I think you've made the comment that if you rush it, you can blow it. So I think for both the valuers in the room, and I think there's a couple, I made sure there was a few, because we need to educate them a little on, and then the developers, which is, we obviously need to work to a feasibility and a project budget, we get it. But how do you make sure that we get the F&B concept right?
Yeah, I think typically some of those things should get decided later. So you start with, we need to agree upon a budget that makes sense. And that's not that hard a thing to do, because we can look at the quality in the market, what are we shooting for, how much do we have to work with? So we decide on that. Then we get an overall timeline that we need to achieve that timeline and make sure we all think that that's appropriate. Within those two parameters, I think rushing the creative process is actually a mistake, because every step you take, you can learn more along the way. Now, the example of the Mexican restaurant in Bangkok, of course we had to design the number of seats in the restaurant.
Right.
We had to design what the kitchen was, but whether it should have been Mexican or something else, we had to take our time to figure that out. Sometimes as the design evolves, something comes in your head that you didn't think of before.
Yeah.
Or as you go along the process, you meet someone along the way that would be perfect to do the cafe, and we thought it could be something different. Or we meet someone that says, oh my God, we should do a sound studio there because we have the best possible DJs, whatever it might be. So I think sometimes developers and feasibility studies want to know everything up front, right? To tick and tie everything, and you can do that. But you might shoot yourself in the foot and not maximize the value of what's possible if you limit yourself up front.
And then there's this whole discussion in the hotel development world, which is, is it easy just to lease that stuff out? I've got, I'll pitch it to Merivale, I'll pitch it to the highest paying tenant I can find for that space, set and forget, and then I'll get Standard Hotels to run my rooms, and I'll get the best of both worlds. How's that look?
I would say if you are doing it with a hotel company that doesn't have the food and beverage expertise, then that's a better model. Because the last thing you want to do is have a restaurant in your hotel that doesn't have a good vibe, that's not helpful to the guests, and it doesn't make money.
Right.
That's like a terrible idea. But it happens a lot. It does happen a lot. A better idea is to have a group that, if you understand it, can do the whole thing under one roof. Because sometimes you get I've seen this before, you have a great restaurant operator who does a fabulous restaurant, but they don't really care about your guests. or they have a nightclub operator, which is kind of the worst sometimes. I know a hotel, we did a W hotel many years ago in Hollywood, and did a rooftop pool. I said, wow, well, let's get a Vegas pool nightclub operator to do the pool at our hotel. Super crowded, super popular, makes sense. And it kind of made sense on the paper. It was a complete disaster. Because they would, first of all, they would pack the place, which they thought they wanted, which made for a terrible guest experience if you're staying in the hotel because it was loud and people going up and down the elevators. Second of all, the people that leased the pool didn't want to let in the hotel guests, so the hotel guests then don't go and have access to the pool. So that if it's not under one roof, it's so disjointed. And the Standard High Line, before COVID, we did $100 million of revenue. 54 million was F&B. We did it all ourselves. But you have to be really, really, really good at it.
And again, the diversity of that product, like everyone assumes it's the boom boom room and whatnot, but I think that's exciting. Now, we did talk about one or two epic fails in F&B, so they do happen still with you guys,
Look,
right?
F&B is a really hard business. It's different, it's not stable, it takes a different mindset. So there are definitely failures. You have to be willing to fail, but you have to be willing to admit it quickly, and if you need to reconcept it, change it. But that could happen with us, or that could happen with a restaurant operator. So, I gave one example the other day, the Standard High Line. And hotels, of course, they trade hands. And so we did a great job with the Standard High Line. We built it up, and a new buyer bought it, a company out of Hong Kong, Gaw Capital, who were great partners, no question about it. But the Standard Grill was doing like 15 million in revenue, it was down to like 12, still a lot. They said, no, we've got to revamp this. We got to get it back up and beyond because we paid so much for the building, etc. So they had an idea to bring a celebrity chef in.
Right.
And we kind of got on board with it. I knew where they were headed, and we sort of acquiesced to do that. And it was an epic mistake because the demands that they wanted, the culture that they wanted relative to the hotel, the tough chefs are tough chefs.
Personality.
Yeah, personalities. And so it was a real failure. And what I take from that is we have to stick to our guns. We have to do what we think is right. And sometimes that means a little bit of a conversation with the owners and find common ground. But we acquiesced too much on that, and it was a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can see this working really well in the context of Melbourne and Sydney, strong culinary scenes, great pub operators, great F&B operators across the board, but again, we're just not, in the hotel sense, delivering the same quality often.
Yeah, but what we like to do is say, and I'll use an example from London, is we're going to do a great, whatever the concept is, restaurant. Who are the right people that are in this market that know F&B better than we do? Who's the right chef to bring in? Who's the right general manager to be in? And then let's just go poach them. Poach them in the sense that let's give them the best opportunity. Let's create infrastructure around them. Let's give them a platform to succeed. That's the right way to do it.
And because you have a brand that's globally recognized, you've got the ability to kind of convince them that it's a decent career move, right?
Absolutely, because also when we finish here, maybe you want to go somewhere else, or maybe you get benefits you wouldn't get elsewhere. Maybe you can, it's hard to be on the floor every single day. So we can allow people, the two reasons I love to grow the company. One is that there are places that I go today. I don't know Sydney well enough yet, I've been here a few hours, but I go to Melbourne. And I stayed at the QT. I know some people were involved, which was lovely. But I personally, as a consumer and as a visitor to Melbourne, I wish there were a standard there. I really wish there were a standard there. So to me, I go to a place like Lisbon, I wish there were a standard there. So that's one reason. The second reason, which we just touched on, people get to a certain level in their careers. And if you don't provide them with new places to go and new opportunities, they leave you.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing more exciting to me than to see we have a guest experience manager who started at Hollywood.
Right.
Then he went to downtown LA. Then he went to the Maldives. Then he went to Hua Hin. Then he became the training manager for all our hotels globally. That's the best. Yeah. That's the best feeling in the world.
It's a real success story for the individual as well. I'm going to move on to a bit of a controversial topic, which is the big guys, just the big operators. And I started my career with Mirvac Hotels. Steve Burt's in the room. We worked on that together. And Mari, a domestic operator, right? So small but punchy. We did an excellent job of just, I think, giving a product that the Australian market really liked. Acquired by Accor at some point, and then I joined Starwood Hotels. So I've worked for the big guys, and now I guess we've watched all of this consolidation happen. There's IHG, purchasing, Kimpton brand. There's the Ennismore acquisition by Core, which is really significant. There's a lot of brands, a lot of amazing brands in that portfolio. There's Hilton and of course Marriott, right, and Starwood. So I guess in Australia there's a big opportunity to shake that up. Like these guys are kind of dominating, and they all want a piece of the lifestyle sector. But what do we say? Like how do we convince the banker in the room that a standard hotel can go head to head? And I think you've kind of touched on this already, but I think it's important we address it.
Yeah, I think one is to just look at our track record of performance in every market we've been in to be able to take on the big guys. We've done it successfully. So I think the track record probably speaks for itself. The hotels have performed very well above their competitors, competitive market share, etc. The hotels have then sold very well for prices much greater than what they were bought for.
Right.
So I think the track record is very important. The other thing is, I think I'm obsessed with great brands, and they take people that are obsessed with them. And what I mean by that is if you're part of a portfolio of 30 brands, it's not the same as being part of something that you're living and breathing and so passionate about. And I joke about it a little bit, but the Marriott portfolio now, and W is part of it, and I'm very proud of what we did there, but it's hard to be one of 30 brands. And I was on the stage of a panel in Berlin, I think last year, and the poor guy, he's the head of Europe, Africa, Middle East for Marriott. And the interviewer said, I'm going to give you a lightning round question. Name your 30 brands. He named like 8. He's the head of the region. So it's kind of sad because people in the audience were saying, oh, you forgot.
Tough job.
Yeah. So it's hard to be, can't take anything away from the distribution systems, the power, the infrastructure that they have. All that they provide is very, very powerful. But if you're a passionate owner, developer that want to do something fantastic and amazing in your market and are willing to do that, you need the people that are just as passionate about that. And then that's the people that live and breathe it every day, not a brand manager for one of 30 brands.
Right. And I think we believe that that's something that we heard from Ace Sydney, and their involvement was very hands-on. But I think you've touched on how you've empowered your team around you to take this company forward, really, I guess, on your behalf in some ways.
Well, I think about it on our behalf, and my dream I took over, as I mentioned, from the founder of the company, and it's really never been about me. You don't see my name out there that much. It's not that. Brands are much more powerful than individuals, and they will live much, much longer. And this business, the boutique hotel business, was started with some very, very powerful individuals. Right. My old boss, Andre Balazs, one of the founders of this whole thing, Ian Schrager, people like that. But me coming into this, I knew my job was to make sure Standard outlived Andre and outlived me. Because if we have a commitment with one of you out here, 20, 30 years, whatever it is, it has to outlive me. Right. And the brands are much more important and much more powerful than the people that started them. That's what we're trying to create.
Yeah. Just talking on brands, you've now got a couple of new brands. Well, not necessarily new, but new within the kind of Standard international portfolio. And I think for the Australian market, it could be quite interesting.
For sure. So we have Standard, which we've talked about a lot about, which you see what we do, big food and beverage, global gateway cities, big resort markets. But we have a brand which I think would be fabulous actually for Australia, called Bunkhouse. Bunkhouse is a brand that we partnered and then acquired about 7 years ago.
Anyone heard of it?
You heard of Bunkhouse?
Heard of Bunkhouse?
You probably wouldn't have. It's a very design-led, culturally led brand out of Austin, Texas. Austin's a really, really cool town. And it's got a lot of similarities in a way to here. It's very outdoorsy. It's very music-driven. The vibe is similar in a lot of ways. And it's just great. And you can imagine a 40-room motel on the roadside that you kind of infuse with like stuff that we talked about, culture and music and retail and a scene, and it's just lovely. And so and it's also got a very light labor model, which I think is something you have to be conscious of.
I heard you sort of almost refer to it as limited service, but
it's
with
kind of like it's limited service with a great vibe, and that's a really interesting model for developers. So we probably want to lead with Standard in these markets, but following on, I think it's a very, very good economic proposition and just a really super cool brand I think would fit very well.
Yeah. And then Perry, which is more like the next level down from Standard.
Yeah, Perry we launched just after the pandemic. There are a lot of hotels in the region, Asia in particular. Think about you guys know Bali, many probably know Bali quite well. think about like a 50-room hotel in Bali that's got something going for it, but the owner doesn't really know what they're doing. And to be able to take those hotels on and partner with the owners and do a light touch of what we could layer on top,
Right.
as well as our infrastructure, that's kind of what Perry's been made for, and it's going to be a successful model, I think.
I mean, we've personally received pictures from your guys on Perry, and I think it's a matter of time that will resonate as well, or connect with an owner. Because as you say, key cities often, yep, you can get your head around the standard model, but in Australia, I think it's probably Sydney, Melbourne, you know, Gold Coast, like we talked about. But Perry could work on fringe locations, maybe a bit more metro, secondary markets. Guys, have a think about any questions you want to ask Amar. He's really easy to talk to, so have a think. I'm going to turn to you guys in a second. We touched on the big brands, but staying independent as an operator, I mean, it's not about being controversial, but I guess you are here in the room as the global chairman of this business. You know, people get FaceTime with you. To me, that's a relationship, and what I've noticed in the last couple of years in terms of hotel development is that it really comes down to the developer's strong intent and belief in their project, and then the operator kind of needs to come in and partner on that, right?
Yeah, that's right. Look, the way this model works, and whether it's us or any of the big brands, it's your business. And the developer and the capital partner, it's their business, and we're going to be partners in it, but you have to believe in what you're doing. And I see some of like the operator selection process,
Right.
and I don't think that's a great process.
Right.
I think what needs to happen, whether you get 4% or 3% or 3.5% or 2.5% of this,
On fees,
on fees, it does not matter. What matters is you have the right partner, build the right product, and all of that is kind of noise. So what I would encourage is that if you want to do this, figure out which brand you love and which people you want to work with, because every problem we've had in any of our hotels are never about the location or about the building ultimately. It's about the relationship we have with the partner. Right. So if you pick the brand and pick the partner and pick the people and make sure you're working with those people, that you can call them, you can text them, you can text me anytime, you can WhatsApp me anytime, that you know who you're dealing with, and that's what really makes all the difference.
Yeah. And obviously that's hard to explain to a banker or a valuation team. How that plays out, but I would say that that's a really important piece of the puzzle, particularly through a global pandemic or a...
Sure, the pandemic was hard for everybody. I know Australia was very, very difficult with the measures that were taken here, but you know, we were saying the other night, hotels never shut their doors, like they never closed down.
Right.
So we didn't know how to lock up the hotels. You never locked them up.
Yep.
So our revenue went from 100 to 0. And the owners own the hotels, and we have all the people. So if you don't have a good relationship, we all had to chip in. We all had to do our best. We all had to tighten our belt. We all had to make hard decisions. And we had to really be partners. And I'm so proud we came out of it stronger than we went into it, which is kind of crazy.
Right.
And that's a tribute to our partners and the relationships we have.
Two things I think I want to just touch on: social responsibility / diversity in your business. You've kind of talked about how you have this amazing all women management team in one part of your business. How's that played out? What's going on there?
Bunkhouse itself, well, first of all, I'm the exec chairman of now the company. Our CEO's Amber. Amber Asher is a woman. She worked with me for the last 10 years. Yeah. Bunkhouse is kind of incredible. It shouldn't even be considered incredible, but the entire leadership team is female. That wasn't by design, it's just because they're the best. And so it's the expression of if you give something they want it done, give it to a busy person. Yeah. We just had the women in our organization are absolutely incredible, and they've kind of taken over, and I feel great about that. So that's one thing. But being inclusive has been part of our DNA forever. I mean, the LGBTQ rights, you know, this just comes so naturally to all the people on our team. It's interesting to watch other people go through it, but this stuff comes really easy to us because it's who you are. Yeah. The social responsibility is an interesting one because we've taken on some issues, and it's always questionable, should a company take on issues? Why do they take on issues? Is that a good thing to do or not? And what we've taken on are a few things that, because they're meaningful to our business and who we are. One of them, which we were having a conversation at lunch, which I'm sure you all think the U.S. is absolutely nuts is gun control. And so a few years ago, there was an incident that happened in Vegas at the Mandalay Bay where someone brought a gun into the hotel, shot from the hotel into a music festival. And it just reminded us that our responsibility, besides all this cool stuff and nightclubs and design and all that, is to take care of the safety of our guests. And if the country's not safe, if the city's not safe, if people are carrying guns, it's not helpful for our business. It's not helpful, it's just terrible. So we've taken that on because we think we need to be human about that.
Have a voice on it, right?
Yeah, and the second one we've taken on is immigration. For a couple of reasons. When our former president came into office, there was an immigration, or the travel ban. If you're coming from the wrong country, you can't come into the country. And we had a long-staying guest who worked, I think she worked for H&M. She stayed at the Standard Hollywood for 15 years. And she called up, she said, I have to cancel my reservation because they're not letting me in the country. I'm stuck in Amsterdam. So this is ridiculous. You can't be a hospitable company if you're not an inhospitable country. So we fought a lot for that. And then immigration, we need people to work in the hotels and want to be in the service sector. And Americans don't seem to want these jobs, so we need people to work there, and so we need people, and we need to treat them well. We need to allow them in the country. So we take on issues that are important to our business that we feel like there's humanity behind it.
Yeah. And that you're a platform that's already in existence, so I guess occasionally to kind of utilise the platform, I say use the power for good. It's not a bad thing, right?
No, and the other thing that happened is when Trump got elected, of course, many young people were very upset about that. And I came to the office that morning, I was upset, but they were posting black squares on Instagram, right? And I was like, what the hell is that? That doesn't do anything. Like, let's be productive about this.
Yes.
And so we decided to give people a platform for their voice. We took these old phone booths, which no one uses phone booths anymore, but we found some. And we decorated them, we put them in our hotels, and we found out there's a direct line to Congress. There's a single line to Congress you can call. So we said, you dial 0, and we set it up so you could dial Congress. And we gave people scripts. We didn't tell them what to say, but here's a means to be able to call Congress. You had no idea you could do that. And then we put the buttons on the phones in our rooms. So the room you can call directly to Congress. So this stuff, why not?
Questions? I'm looking. I know lots of people are curious. Sorry? There are prizes, yeah. If you ask a question, you might get a nice little prize. Developers are there. Ange, come on, Ange.
Hi, I work in PR and interested to know what weighting do you put on PR budgets when it comes to putting on these incredible activations at your hotels that bring the noise, bring people, drive media?
PR way more than marketing.
Right?
Way more than marketing. We do almost very little traditional marketing. We can't afford it. It doesn't spread well. It doesn't go. It looks forced. Even now, more and more, it's less relevant. It's less accepted. So to us, the best is the word of mouth, and the word of mouth comes from getting the word out there. Right. So it comes from doing really cool stuff, really great events, really good activations, and then using PR to get the word out there. And then that's how we let it spread. But much more on PR than traditional marketing.
Any designers want to know? Two. I'll take Andrew and then Nick. Off you go, Andrew.
At the Standard in New York, creating a brutalist building above a new brutalist building. It's quite an unusual thing to do, but you've sort of manifested that. In retrospect, it feels very logical. So there's sort of this disjunction that ultimately becomes reality. Obviously you've only been here for a few hours, but do you have any sense of in Sydney what that kind of spark might be?
Sydney, I don't, because I really haven't spent enough time here. I will say what we're doing in Fitzroy is really cool. Yeah. And I was with Woods Baggett, who's doing it with us, and our developer there, Deal Corp. But I went to see, I've been seeing it as it's been coming up on the photos, but it's this incredible copper color building that's getting this patina on it already. And it's bigger than what's in the neighborhood. But I promise you think that it's been there forever. And it should have been there. Now, a brutalist building wouldn't have worked there, but somehow they came up with something that really feels like it should have been there, but it doesn't feel fake. It's not like we're trying to look like a brick building. We didn't do a brick building with spray painted graffiti on it. That's what everything in Fitzroy is, but if we did that, that would have been fake. but we did something that looks like it could have, would have, should have been there. So I don't know Sydney yet, depends on the neighborhood, but I think Fitzroy is a very good example. The cool thing about brutalist stuff was like, we thought that is what should have looked like it was there already, and we found the building in London, that was it.
Yeah.
And it actually was there. So we're super excited to get that building.
Go retro. Nick? Can you speak up, or do you want to do it on mic, mate?
Yep.
I just had a question regarding, the green issues and environmental issues. We get hammered with that all the time on some projects that have no interest and some projects that are absolutely focused on it, in which case we get a specialist involved. But in terms of your company perspective, how do you feel about that?
I would say we're somewhere in between, not from a philosophical perspective, but from the perspective of the reality is we're working with developers who have more control over the building aspects of it. So we're not rigid in the fact that we have to have this. We like to have like-minded people who are thinking about that. One I'm quite proud of is a hotel within the Bunkhouse brand we built in Austin, Texas, new build building. And I don't know if they do it in Australia, I'm not sure. We did a mass timber building, which is the first boutique, one of the first hotels ever to be done mass timber in the US, which is a very sustainable building technique using local materials. It's much better for the environment, post-use, it's breathable, etc. So we love new stuff, we love new techniques, but from a building perspective, we're usually less in control of that. But we love to partner with people who want to be progressive about it.
Who are passionate about it too. Yeah. Tracy, come on down.
Yeah. Thank you.
We love all your designers equally.
I was wondering, looking at a lot of different buildings with developers, what is too fewer rooms and what's too bigger rooms? Where do you sit within
The amount of rooms?
Yeah.
So I think for standard, the reality is, because of all we put into it, you need a good amount of rooms. And I would say 100 is probably the lower end. We've done some, Ibiza we opened is about 75 because of the market, a lot of F&B and stuff. So I think 100, just rough numbers, is as low as we would go.
Yeah.
Size from the big side, the biggest hotel we have is the Highline, 338 rooms. So we can do, it's not hard to service more rooms, but what happens is you don't want to dilute the clientele, not the profile of the clientele, but we don't want to rely overly on group business or crew or just other.
Yeah.
If you get desperate, you start diluting it by cutting your rate. So I think you want to have the right amount. There's no upper bound, but I think you want to be careful to make sure you're not relying on segments that are people that are coming there because of the price, as opposed to coming there for the experience. So I would say 150 to 250 is probably the sweet spot, as low as 100, as high as 300.
100 in Sydney, is doable.
So a place like Sydney, if you have a fabulous location with a lot of F&B, you could do 75 or 100 rooms, something like that, yeah.
Exciting. Andrew?
Just as a follow-on to that, on the F&B front, is there the brand DNA is kind of in F&B. Is there a ratio that you look for, in terms of whether it's
revenue,
square meterage or revenue, or
it ends up being about 40 to 50%. Bangkok right now is 75% F&B, which is kind of crazy. For those people who have seen that hotel, that's a little extreme. I would say 40 to 50% is probably about where we end up. I wouldn't say we target it that way, but we end up putting it all together. That's just kind of how it maps out.
So
one thing for the valuers, and with this issue we've had, is that when you actually look at our hotels, the overall margins are lower than you might expect. Because then you look at it compared to one of the big box hotels and say, well, you have a much lower margin. The reality is the F&B business has a lower margin, so it brings the margin percentage down, but the overall dollars that are coming to the bottom line are higher. So sometimes they get confused, it's a lower margin, but okay, well, you can take the revenue out and have a higher margin, we have less profit.
Totally. But there's so many developers or real estate owners accepting that, okay, I've got all this empty lobby space. I mean, I used to work out of the Sheraton on the Park on Elizabeth Street, and it's a beautiful building, and it's empty 90% of the time. And so it's about not accepting that proposition as pretty important.
And you see a lot of hotels build these big grand lobbies.
Right.
And as I said before, it's how big you build it and what you put in. If you don't build it that big and fill it up with people, it's a lot better than building it big as an architectural statement.
Kieran, you've got a few hotels. Any thoughts?
Last question is
No, good mate. David? Yep. Hey, David.
Yeah, hi, I'm a developer. We're making a commitment to hotels for the main residential stuff.
Yeah.
How do you up the incidentals? When the client spend on that? A minibar's dead. Is it in-room massages? I mean, how do you get those checkout bills to be more than the room rate itself?
It's a good question. I think keeping people on property is the best way to do it. Because if they're leaving to get their coffee in the morning and going to Starbucks or whatever, versus having a great cafe in the hotel, why wouldn't we have that in the hotel? If they can have 3 dinners on property instead of 1, that's a good, so getting them to stay on property as much as possible because you provide the different experiences that they can have is the best way to do it. If there's a market for it, like Miami, we did a social bathing spa, so getting them to stay there for an extra night. 3 nights instead of 2 nights. So getting them to stay on property as much as they can while they're there, and getting them to stay longer than they would normally stay, because you're providing those experiences is the best way to do it.
I think, and this is not to answer the question, but the other thing I've noticed is how much content gets driven through these lifestyle hotels versus traditional hotels. So the promotional activities are just...
Yeah, that point, like, people will pay us to have photo shoots at the hotels, because the hotels are so beautiful. That's one thing. The last one I would say is events. Events is a very, very profitable business. So setting yourself up, so the Boom Boom Room now, if you want to have an event there, it's $100,000. Right. And we won't do it. So if you get a space that's that iconic, the events business is a very, very profitable business if you set the spaces up right.
There you go, Work Club. Hi. Hey, Sophie.
What do you think has been key to the culture at the Standard to allow ideas like the room room or the Mexican restaurant in a hotel to become ideas to then actual...
Great question. The question was, how do you get these ideas to flow and put them in motion? So when we think of doing a hotel, I literally ask, what can we do that's never been done before? I want to know what we can do that's never been done before. Doesn't mean we'll do it, we need to, I don't know what it is. And it doesn't come from me. Something might come from me. It's not top down. I'm not the youngest person in the room anymore. I don't know exactly what's happening out there, but as we develop it, what can we do that's never been done ever, never been done in this market, and let's talk about it. And you have to start with that question and be dead serious about it. And let people see that you're willing to be serious about it. Then the ideas start to flow.
I'm inspired by that. It's great. Steve, you okay? Yep.
What's 2 examples of where the Standard brand has added value to the site and that we actually demonstrate that the brand did add to the site?
Where the Standard brand has added value to the site?
Sale price.
Sale price. For sure on the reversion and sale price. If you look at, Standard Highline, for example, the original developer built that for about $450,000 per key. And because of what we did there, they ended up selling it for $1.1 million a key. Now you could say the real estate prices went up and there's a whole bunch of reasons, Manhattan went up, etc. But I can tell you, no one could have imagined in a 200,000 square foot building, you would generate $100 million of revenue with $20 million to the bottom line. And that's 100% of because of what we created and the experiences we created to make that building both efficient and incredibly productive. And that return on investment for the owner was great because of what we did together with them. The other one that hasn't sold yet, but the Standard London, that building, as I said, every other developer wanted to tear it down. Every other brand that looked at it wanted to tear it down. We came up with a plan not to tear it down. Just by virtue of having a plan not to tear it down, we saved the developer a ton of time and a ton of money. Then they wanted to add 2 more floors on there to maximize the density. Okay, it's not that easy to do. Google was putting their headquarters 2 blocks away in King's Cross. Eric Schmidt was a fan of the Standard brand. We reached out to him, his office, to ask him to write a letter on behalf of Standard to get 2 more floors for the benefit of the developer and us, and we got it done. So that's the power of the connectivity and relationships that the brand has.
Any other thoughts, guys? I think you can grab Amar after this. He's like here all night. I think it'll just keep flowing. Mate, is there anything else you want to add?
That's it. I think the last thing I said last night is, after saying all this stuff, the reason I'm in this business, the reason I hope you guys are in this life, it's really fun. And what's business or life about if you're not enjoying it at the same time? If you can find a business that you're proud of, make a hotel that you're proud of, you enjoy the process of it, you enjoy owning it, and we have fun together, and that's why I'm in this business, and I think that's what I try to infuse. And the last thing I would say is, what I tell our team all the time is, we're in the business of making people have fun. And if they have more fun, they come back to our hotels. So we got to show that, we got to demonstrate it, we got to live it, and do what we practice, what we preach.
Totally. And you know, for the people in this room, I think they're all believers in the sector and the space and the opportunity. It's just that sometimes it's hard to pull off,
It's really
right?
hard.
It's really hard.
It's capital intensive. The banks are difficult. Interest rates are hard. All of it's difficult, but it's much more. Getting something done is difficult. It's much more rewarding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I now want to just do a quick thank you to our guests and you guys, the supporters. So thanks for coming out on behalf of Cre8tive Property and Standard Hotels. We've absolutely loved the opportunity to work with Standard, but also to present the ideas to you guys. We wanted to do it in an unconventional way rather than sponsoring a hotel conference in a different state. I said to Amar and Flo, I thought this would be a much better way, a more intimate way to connect with you guys and really discuss the stuff, hopefully, that matters in a sense to you. So a quick thanks also to Twee and Flo from Standard Hotels, well done, thank you. Also the Work Club guys, thanks Sam and your teammate for hosting us and putting this on. We've had a great 2 days with the Work Club guys. Cre8tive, my wife Kate over there, hi honey. And Dale supported, there he is in the back, so thanks guys for that. And then finally to Amar, when do you leave to go home? Tomorrow. So this is Amar's last proper night here. And it's a real short trip, but I think we're just really grateful for your time. Obviously grateful for the insights that you've shared and the knowledge the last couple of days.
My pleasure, and I look forward to being back. And thank you for all you did to set this up.
Oh, pleasure, mate. There's a lot of, I feel like there's support around this brand. Doesn't mean that we're exclusive with these guys. We're just trying to connect the dots, right? So that's what we're here for. Amar, is a very small gesture of our deep appreciation. Consider this your gift from Australia. I'll explain. Yeah. So tomorrow, do this one first actually. Just take it out. Firstly, it's an esky. It's an Australian icon. Tim Tams. Vegemite. And it's a 6-pack, all right? So tomorrow, today's 4th of July in America, and I know you're not there. You'll be there tomorrow, so you'll miss it. But I kind of thought, hopefully you'll remember this one. Few Australian icons, so you know where you were in 2023. This other gift is more a small memento for. Just watch it doesn't sort of slip out like that. There you go. Oh, wow. It's just a small gift, mate, to show you the beach that you never got to visit. So Bondi Beach, maybe on the next occasion you'll get to. So guys, hang around, have a quick drink, please mingle, hang, chill, enjoy the time together. Thanks again, everyone.